In 1887, at the West Riding Lunatic Asylum in Yorkshire, England, a single photograph challenged everything Victorian medicine understood about consciousness and identity. What happened to Eleanor Hartwell, age 19, would force the medical establishment to confront an impossibility they could document, but never explain. This is the story preserved in the asylum's sealed archives, witnessed by 43 staff members and patients, hidden for 98 years. A story about a young woman who entered the asylum as one person and became someone else entirely, someone who had died 3 years before Eleanor was born. Eleanor Margaret Hartwell arrived at West Riding Asylum on March 12, 1887, accompanied by her uncle, Thomas Hartwell, a wool merchant from Leeds. She was 19 years old, orphaned at 14 when her parents perished in a factory fire. For 5 years, Eleanor had managed her uncle's household while caring for her 2 younger cousins, ages 7 and 9. Staff noted her gentle manner and quick smile despite obvious exhaustion. Dr. James Crichton Brown, the asylum's director, described her in his initial assessment as remarkably articulate, well-mannered, and possessing unusual intelligence for her station. Eleanor enjoyed reading, particularly poetry, and had taught herself basic French from books borrowed from the lending library. She corresponded regularly with a childhood friend, Mary Ashton, who had moved to Manchester. Her uncle brought her to the asylum after she experienced what he termed nervous episodes, periods of confusion and disorientation following the death of her younger cousin William from scarlet fever. Eleanor blamed herself for his death, believing she should have recognized his symptoms sooner. The grief had manifested in sleeplessness, loss of appetite, and occasional moments where she seemed unable to recognize familiar surroundings. On the morning of April the 3rd, 1887, Eleanor sat in the women's day room completing needlework, a pillowcase embroidered with forget-me-nots. Attendant Sarah Pickering later testified that Eleanor seemed entirely herself, perhaps more cheerful than usual. She had received a letter from Mary Ashton that morning and read portions aloud to other patients, laughing at her friends' descriptions of Manchester society. At 10:30, Eleanor requested permission to visit the asylum library. She selected a volume of Tennyson's poetry and settled near the window overlooking the gardens. Attendant Pickering noted Eleanor pausing occasionally to gaze outside, her expression peaceful. At precisely 11:47 a.m., according to the hall clock, Eleanor dropped her book. When Pickering approached, Eleanor was staring at her hands with an expression Pickering described as absolute horror, as though seeing them for the first time. At 11:47 a.m., Eleanor Hartwell's book struck the floor with a sound that made 6 patients and 2 attendants turn toward her. What they witnessed would be documented in 17 separate testimonies. Eleanor sat rigid, hands extended before her face. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. When Attendant Pickering touched her shoulder, Eleanor recoiled violently, pressing herself against the wall. Her eyes, witnesses consistently described this detail, appeared unfocused, pupils dilated despite the bright morning light streaming through the windows. "Where am I?" Eleanor whispered, her voice higher pitched than normal. These aren't my hands. These aren't my hands." Pickering attempted to calm her, but Eleanor pushed past her, stumbling toward the mirror hanging near the doorway. Upon seeing her reflection, she released a sound that Attendant Margaret Thornton described as not quite a scream, more like the cry of someone discovering a loved one's corpse. Eleanor clawed at her face, pulling at her cheeks as though trying to remove a mask. "This isn't my face," she repeated. I don't understand. Where is Catherine? Where is my daughter?" Dr. Crichton Brown arrived within minutes. He found Eleanor crouched in the corner, weeping, speaking in fragmented sentences about people and places unfamiliar to her recorded history. When he asked her name, she looked at him with genuine confusion. "I'm Margaret," she said. "Margaret Ashfield." "Why are you calling me Eleanor? I don't know anyone named Eleanor." The doctor attempted standard orientation questions. Eleanor, or the person inhabiting Eleanor's body, could not identify the year, the location, or explain how she had arrived at the asylum. When shown her reflection again, she touched the glass tentatively, tears streaming down her face. "I was 43 years old," she whispered. "I had gray hair. I had a scar here." She touched her left temple. "From when I fell from the horse." "This girl, who is this girl?" Dr. Crichton Brown's hand, witnesses noted, trembled as he wrote his initial observations. Dr. Crichton Brown recorded in his private journal that evening, "In 23 years of psychiatric practice, I have witnessed every manner of delusion and dissociative state. This presents differently. The patient demonstrates complete conviction without the characteristic markers of psychosis. Her confusion appears genuine. She is not performing madness, but experiencing a crisis of identity that defies classification." Crichton Brown, Personal Journal, April 3, 1887. Thomas Hartwell, summoned to the asylum that afternoon, provided the family perspective. When Eleanor saw him, she showed no recognition. "She looked at me as a stranger," he testified to the medical board. "Not with the blank stare of amnesia I've witnessed in factory accident victims, but with the polite confusion of someone meeting an unknown person. She apologized for not knowing my name. My own niece, whom I've known since birth, apologized to me." Hartwell, Testimony to Medical Board, April 5, 1887. The third crucial witness was Dr. Robert Morrison, a visiting physician from Edinburgh, known for his skepticism regarding hysteria diagnoses. He examined Eleanor on April 4th, specifically to debunk what he assumed was theatrical performance. His report stated, "I arrived prepared to expose malingering. After 3 hours of examination, I departed deeply unsettled. This patient's knowledge base has fundamentally altered. She cannot recall basic facts about her own life, yet possesses detailed knowledge of events, locations, and people she should have no awareness of. She is not pretending ignorance. She genuinely does not remember being Eleanor Hartwell." Morrison Clinical Report, April 4, 1887. Dr. Crichton Brown conducted systematic testing beginning April 4th. Eleanor, now insisting her name was Margaret Ashfield, could not identify photographs of her deceased parents or cousins. She showed no recognition of her own handwriting in letters written weeks earlier. When presented with her needlework, she examined it as one would a stranger's creation, noting only that the stitching is quite fine. However, when asked about her supposed life as Margaret Ashfield, she provided extraordinary detail. She claimed to have lived in the village of Thornbury, approximately 40 miles from Leeds. She described her husband, Robert Ashfield, a blacksmith. She spoke of her daughter, Catherine, born in 1851. She recounted specific memories: the pattern of wallpaper in her bedroom, the crack in the church bell that caused it to ring off key, the name of the vicar, who had served the parish for 30 years. Dr. Morrison designed a crucial test. He presented Eleanor with a detailed map of Yorkshire and asked her to identify Thornbury. Without hesitation, she pointed to the correct location, then traced the route from Thornbury to Leeds, naming every village along the way. When Morrison asked how she knew this, she explained she had traveled that route twice, once to visit her sister in 1872, once to attend her mother's funeral in 1878. "I have never traveled beyond Leeds," Eleanor Hartwell had written in a letter to Mary Ashton 6 months earlier. "I should dearly love to see more of Yorkshire, but circumstances keep me close to home." Hartwell, letter to Mary Ashton, October 1886. The critical impossible detail emerged on April 6th. Eleanor described her daughter Catherine's wedding, which she claimed occurred on June 14th, 1873, at St. Michael's Church in Thornbury. She described the dress, ivory silk with Brussels lace, and the flowers, white roses and lavender. She named the guests, the hymns sung, the meal served at the wedding breakfast. Dr. Crichton Browne's journal entry that evening reads, "If this is delusion, it is the most elaborate and consistent I have encountered. She does not waver. She does not contradict herself. She speaks of this other life with the casual certainty of lived experience." Crichton Browne, Personal Journal, April 6, 1887. Word spread through the asylum and into the surrounding community. Staff members who had known Eleanor for 3 weeks found themselves questioning their own memories. Had she always seemed slightly different? Several attendants requested transfers, uncomfortable with what they termed the changed girl. Local clergy visited, attempting spiritual explanations. Reverend Thomas Whitmore spent 2 hours in conversation with Eleanor, emerging visibly shaken. She speaks of church services and scripture with knowledge appropriate to a woman of middle age, not a girl of 19, he reported. The asylum divided. Believers who insisted something impossible had occurred, and skeptics who attributed everything to elaborate hysteria. On April 10th, Dr. Crichton Browne made a decision that would transform the case from medical curiosity to documented impossibility. He traveled to Thornbury with Dr. Morrison and 2 witnesses, Attendant Pickering and a court stenographer named William Marsh, to verify Eleanor's claims. The village existed exactly as Eleanor described. The church bell did ring with an off-key tone due to a crack sustained in 1869. The vicar, Reverend Edmund Blackwell, had indeed served the parish for 31 years. Dr. Morrison's journal records the growing unease. Each detail confirms. The wallpaper pattern she described, discontinued in 1875, still adorns the walls of what was once the Ashfield cottage, now occupied by a farming family. Morrison Travel Journal, April 10, 1887. The critical discovery occurred at St. Michael's Church. Reverend Blackwell, initially confused by their inquiries, consulted the parish registry. His hands shook as he read aloud. Catherine Ashfield, daughter of Robert and Margaret Ashfield, married to Thomas Brennan, June 14, 1873. The entry included a notation about the bride's dress, ivory silk with Brussels lace, and the flowers used in decoration, white roses and lavender. William Marsh's stenographic record captures the moment. Dr. Crichton Browne requested permission to examine the registry more thoroughly. Reverend Blackwell provided access to records dating to 1850. We found the marriage record of Robert and Margaret Ashfield, dated April 3, 1850. Birth record of Catherine Ashfield, May 12, 1851. And then, on the page for deaths in 1884, the entry that made Dr. Morrison sit down heavily on the church pew. Margaret Ashfield died March 15, 1884, age 43, of pneumonia. Marsh, stenographic record, April the 10th, 1887. Margaret Ashfield had died 3 years before Eleanor Hartwell was admitted to West Riding Asylum. She had died 3 years and 18 days before Eleanor Hartwell claimed to have become her. The group visited the churchyard. Margaret Ashfield's grave bore a simple stone marker. Beloved wife and mother, 1841, 1884. Dr. Crichton Browne stood before it for several minutes without speaking. Finally, he turned to his companions and said, "We must document everything. No one will believe this without irrefutable evidence." Dr. William Gull, physician to Queen Victoria and Britain's leading expert on nervous disorders, arrived at West Riding Asylum on April 18, 1887. His reputation for scientific rigor was unmatched. He had famously dismissed numerous cases of supposed supernatural phenomena as misdiagnosed medical conditions. He came to Yorkshire specifically to debunk what he termed the Hartwell delusion. His initial examination lasted 6 hours. He tested Eleanor's memory, reflexes, sensory perception, and cognitive function. He interviewed staff, reviewed all documentation, and examined the evidence collected from Thornbury. His preliminary report, written that evening, marked a dramatic shift in his position. "I arrived as a skeptic. I remain a skeptic of supernatural explanations. However, I cannot dismiss the evidence before me. This patient possesses knowledge she cannot have acquired through normal means." Gull, Preliminary Report, April 18, 1887. Dr. Gull discovered something that intensified the mystery. During neurological examination, he noted Eleanor's handwriting had changed. Her signature, previously neat and upright, now slanted leftward with distinctive flourishes. When he compared it to documents signed by Margaret Ashfield, obtained from Thornbury's parish records, the similarities were striking. More disturbing was Eleanor's physical presentation. Dr. Gull noted in his detailed report, "The patient moves differently." Staff who knew her before April 3rd confirmed this observation. "Her gait has altered. She walks with the careful steps of someone experiencing joint pain. Though physical examination reveals no arthritis or injury, she holds her head at a different angle. She gestures with her hands in ways the attendants describe as not Eleanor's manner." Gull, Complete Medical Assessment, April 20th, 1887. Dr. Gull's conclusion sent shock waves through British medical circles. "I can document the impossible, but I cannot explain it. This patient has somehow acquired the memories, mannerisms, and knowledge of a woman who died in 1884. Whether through unknown neurological mechanism or phenomenon beyond current scientific understanding, Eleanor Hartwell is no longer entirely herself." On April 25th, Eleanor made a statement that would prove her most verifiable claim. During conversation with Dr. Crichton Browne, she suddenly became agitated. "Catherine," she said urgently, "my daughter Catherine. She's in danger. She's with child and something is wrong. The baby is positioned incorrectly. She needs medical attention immediately or she'll die in childbirth." Dr. Crichton Browne noted the specificity. Eleanor claimed Catherine lived in Manchester with her husband, Thomas Brennan. She provided the exact address: 47 Deansgate, 3rd floor. She described symptoms Catherine would be experiencing: severe back pain, reduced fetal movement, bleeding. "I know this sounds mad," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "I know I'm in an asylum, And you think I'm insane, but I'm a mother. I know my daughter, please. Someone must check on her, please. Dr. Morrison volunteered to investigate. He traveled to Manchester on April 26th and located the address. Catherine Brennan did exist. She was indeed pregnant, 7 months along. When Morrison explained his unusual visit, carefully omitting details about Eleanor, Catherine's husband confirmed his wife had been experiencing the exact symptoms Eleanor described. Morrison convinced Catherine to see a physician. Dr. Henry Ashworth examined her and discovered a breech presentation with complications that could have proven fatal during delivery. With proper medical intervention, Catherine delivered a healthy son on June 3, 1887. Dr. Morrison's report stated, "Without the warning provided by the patient at West Riding Asylum, Catherine Brennan would likely have attempted home birth with a midwife, with potentially fatal results. The patient knew details about her supposed daughter's condition that would be impossible to know through any conventional means." Morrison Manchester Investigation Report, June 5, 1887. The case attracted attention from the Home Office in June 1887. Sir Edmund Duquesne, chairman of the Prison Commission and advisor on mental health policy, arrived with 2 physicians from the Royal College of Surgeons. Their mandate was to determine whether Eleanor Hartwell posed a security risk or represented a phenomenon requiring government monitoring. The official examination lasted 3 days. Sir Edmund's team conducted every test available to Victorian medicine. They brought photographs of Margaret Ashfield obtained from her daughter. Eleanor identified herself immediately in images she had never seen. They tested her knowledge of events from Margaret's life against testimony from Thornbury residents. Every detail matched. The official report, classified until 1985, concluded, "The subject demonstrates knowledge and characteristics consistent with the deceased Margaret Ashfield. No evidence of fraud or conspiracy has been detected. The mechanism by which this has occurred remains unexplained. Recommendation: subject should remain under medical supervision indefinitely. Public disclosure should be prevented to avoid social panic." Duquesne, official report to Home Office, June 18, 1887. Following this report, the asylum received instructions to limit Eleanor's contact with visitors and prohibit discussion of the case with press. Dr. Crichton Brown was ordered to maintain detailed records, but cease public presentations about the case. The government established a small fund to ensure Eleanor's continued care at West Riding Asylum. The message was clear: Eleanor Hartwell would never be released. The crisis came on August 12, 1887. For 4 months, Eleanor had existed in a state of dual consciousness. Memories of both Eleanor Hartwell and Margaret Ashfield competing for dominance. Staff noted increasing distress. She would begin sentences as Eleanor and complete them as Margaret. She confused dates and ages. She called for her mother, then remembered her mother was dead, then insisted her daughter Catherine was her mother. At 3 a.m., night attendant Ruth Coleman found Eleanor standing at her window, hands pressed against the glass. "I can't remember which life is real," Eleanor whispered. Was I Eleanor who became Margaret, or Margaret who dreamed she was Eleanor? I'm losing both of them. I'm losing myself. Dr. Crichton Brown was summoned. He found Eleanor in a state of complete dissociation, unresponsive to her name, either name. For 6 hours she remained catatonic, eyes open but unseeing. At 9:15 a.m., Eleanor suddenly seized Dr. Crichton Brown's hand. "I understand now," she said, her voice carrying an eerie calm. "I'm neither of them anymore." Eleanor died when Margaret came. Margaret died in 1884. What I'm now is something else, something in between. She turned to face him fully. You can't fix this. You can't make me Eleanor again because Eleanor is gone. You can't make me Margaret because Margaret is dead. I'm the space where they overlapped. I'm the echo. Dr. Crichton Brown asked what she wanted. Eleanor's response was documented by 3 witnesses present. I want to stop fighting it. I want to accept that I'm something science doesn't have a name for yet. I want to stop trying to be released because there's no life outside these walls for someone who doesn't know which life is hers. I want to stay here where people understand I'm not mad. I'm impossible. The decision was made that day. Eleanor Hartwell would remain at West Riding Asylum indefinitely, not as a patient requiring cure, but as a documented impossibility requiring protection. In the months following her crisis, Eleanor stabilized into a new identity, a fusion of both women's memories and personalities. Dr. Crichton Brown noted, "She no longer struggles against the duality. She speaks of Eleanor's childhood and Margaret's marriage with equal clarity and emotional connection. She has integrated both lives into a single, coherent consciousness." Crichton Brown, Progress Notes, November 1887. Dr. Gull returned in December 1887 to conduct follow-up examination. His analysis attempted scientific explanation. Current theories of consciousness suggest memory is stored throughout the brain's neural networks. Perhaps through mechanism unknown, the patient accessed memories from another consciousness, whether through genetic inheritance, environmental exposure, or phenomenon beyond current understanding. We can document the transfer of information but cannot explain the mechanism. Gull, Follow-up, Assessment, December 1887. Eleanor herself provided the most poignant explanation in a letter to Catherine Brennan, written in January 1888. I know you find it difficult to believe I carry your mother's memories. I understand your skepticism. But I know the lullaby she sang when you had nightmares, the one about the silver moon and the golden stars. I know the scar on your left knee from when you fell climbing the apple tree at age 7. I know she worried about you every day and loved you more than her own life. If that's madness, then madness carries truth medicine cannot measure. Eleanor Hartwell. Letter to Catherine Brennan, January 1888. What remained was Eleanor's ability to recall both lives with equal clarity. The impossible knowledge never faded. She could describe Eleanor's 10th birthday and Margaret's wedding day with the same vivid detail. She existed as living proof that consciousness, memory, and identity were far more mysterious than Victorian science understood. In 1985, when government files were declassified, researcher Dr. Patricia Morehouse discovered the complete asylum records at the West Yorkshire Archive Service. What she found validated every impossible claim. Forensic analysis of Eleanor's handwriting confirmed the dramatic shift on April 3, 1887. Graphologist James Sterling's report stated, "The handwriting samples show characteristics consistent with 2 different individuals. The pressure, slant, letter formation, and signature style changed completely. This is not consistent with deliberate forgery or gradual evolution of handwriting. This represents an immediate total transformation." Sterling Graphology Report 1986. Modern genealogical research confirmed every verifiable detail. Margaret Ashfield's life matched Eleanor's descriptions exactly. Catherine Brennan's medical records, preserved in Manchester archives, confirmed the complicated pregnancy and the intervention that saved her life. Parish records, census data, and personal correspondence all validated Eleanor's impossible knowledge. Most remarkably, Dr. Morehouse discovered photographs. The 1887 asylum photograph of Eleanor Hartwell showed a young woman with distinctive features. A photograph of Margaret Ashfield from 1882, discovered in Catherine Brennan's estate, showed no physical resemblance. Yet in Eleanor's asylum photographs taken after April 1887, subtle changes appeared in her expression, her posture, her way of holding her head. Changes that made her seem older, as though Margaret's consciousness had altered Eleanor's physical presentation. Dr. Morehouse's conclusion? We now possess documentation proving Eleanor Hartwell genuinely acquired memories and knowledge from Margaret Ashfield. Modern neuroscience still cannot explain this phenomenon. We have proven the impossible occurred. We have not explained how. Eleanor Hartwell's case parallels other documented Victorian instances of consciousness transfer. In 1882, Mary Reynolds of Pennsylvania exhibited similar dual consciousness, alternating between two distinct personalities with separate memories. In 1893, Ansel Bourne, a preacher from Rhode Island, disappeared and resurfaced weeks later with no memory of his identity but complete knowledge of another man's life. These cases challenged Victorian understanding of consciousness as fixed and singular. They suggested memory might exist independently of individual identity. They raised questions that remain unanswered. Can consciousness transfer between individuals? Can memories survive death? Does identity exist beyond the physical brain? Modern neuroscience acknowledges phenomena like cellular memory in transplant recipients and genetic memory in trauma survivors. But Eleanor's case remains unexplained. She acquired not fragments, but complete consciousness, decades of lived experience from someone who had died years earlier. Eleanor Hartwell lived at West Riding Asylum for 46 years. She never married. She maintained correspondence with Catherine Brennan until Catherine's death in 1921. She spent her days reading, writing detailed accounts of both her lives, and working in the asylum garden. Staff who knew her described a woman of remarkable peace despite her impossible circumstances. She told new attendants, "I've lived 2 lives in one body. Most people don't get that privilege." She spoke of both Eleanor's parents and Margaret's husband with genuine love and loss. In her final letter, written in 1933 at age 65, Eleanor reflected, "I spent years trying to understand what happened to me. I never found answers. But I learned something more valuable, that consciousness is more vast and mysterious than we imagine, that love transcends death, and that identity is not as fixed as we believe. I was Eleanor, I became Margaret. In the end, I was both and neither. Proof that we are more than we know." Eleanor Hartwell, final letter, 1933. Eleanor died on February 7, 1933, of heart failure. She was buried in the asylum cemetery under a stone that reads simply, Eleanor Hartwell, 1868-1933. 2 lives, 1 soul. The 1887 photograph of Eleanor Hartwell hangs in the West Yorkshire archive. Her eyes stare directly at the camera with an expression that seems to hold both youth and age, innocence and experience. 43 witnesses documented her transformation. Government officials investigated and classified their findings. Medical experts examined and couldn't explain. What happened to Eleanor Hartwell challenges everything we believe about consciousness, identity, and the boundaries of self. If this story has made you question the nature of human consciousness, subscribe to our channel for more documented cases that science cannot explain. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to expand what we think is possible.